"Just kill me fast," she said. The lonely rancher opened a blanket and stumbled back in horror. Ethan Hale lived a life that most people would call lonely, but he had grown used to it. His ranch sat on the edge of a wide, open plain, far from any town or neighbor. Rolling fields of golden grass stretched for miles, broken only by a few scattered trees and the distant outline of mountains. The wind often blew harshly across the land, carrying with it the smell of earth and grass, and sometimes, late at night, the eerie cries of wild animals. For most people, that kind of isolation would be unbearable, but for Ethan, it was normal. He had been alone for almost 10 years. His wife, Sarah, had passed suddenly, leaving him with nothing but memories and the routines of ranch life. The early mornings, the chores, the quiet nights by the fireplace. These things kept him grounded, but sometimes when the wind howled and the house creaked, he felt the weight of his solitude pressing down on him. It was during those moments that he wondered if the world outside his property even existed anymore. Raven's life followed a strict rhythm. He rose with the sun, checked the fences, fed the cattle, and repaired whatever needed fixing. The work kept him busy and distracted him from thoughts that could grow too heavy if left unchecked. The days were long, but the nights were longer, and they were when his loneliness felt most acute. He rarely ventured into town, preferring to handle what he could on his own. That particular evening, the sky was dark with heavy clouds. A storm was coming, and Ethan could smell the damp air before he even noticed the first drops of rain. He had been checking the fences along the northern edge of his land when he spotted something unusual near the old cattle shed. At first he thought it might be an animal seeking shelter from the storm, but as he got closer, he realized it wasn't moving like a normal animal. Ethan's heart began to race. He had seen a lot in his life, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to encounter. He moved cautiously, his boots sinking slightly into the wet grass. The rain began to fall harder, drumming against the brim of his hat and the wide leaves of the lone trees scattered across his property. Each step toward the shed felt heavier than the last, as though the wind itself was warning him to turn back, brace. Then he heard it, a faint, trembling voice. "Just kill me fast!" The words were barely more than a whisper, carried away partially by the wind, but they were unmistakable. Ethan froze. He had not expected a human voice, and the fear that gripped him was different from any fear he had ever known. It was immediate, sharp, and confusing. For a moment he thought about turning around, going back to the warmth of his house, and pretending he hadn't heard anything. But something inside him refused. Years of living alone had not hardened his heart completely. But deep down, a part of him still believed that when someone needed help, you could not walk away. He took a deep breath, feeling the cold rain soak through his coat, and moved closer. As he approached, he saw her. She was a young woman, wrapped tightly in what looked like an old, dirty blanket. Her hair was tangled, her face pale, and she shivered uncontrollably from more than just the cold. She looked as if she had been out here for hours, maybe longer, but Ethan's mind raced with questions. Who was she? How had she gotten here? And why had she said such terrifying words? Ethan knelt beside her, keeping his voice calm and steady. Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you, he said. The woman didn't respond at first. She flinched when he moved closer, as if any sudden motion might be dangerous. He noticed her hands, which were thin and weak, trembling as they peeked out from the edges of the blanket. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear and confusion, and when they met his, Ethan felt a strange mix of pity and alarm. "Where are you from?" he asked softly. But the woman only shook her head, murmuring again, Just end it, please."
Ethan felt a pang in his chest.
It was hard to know what to do when someone was in such distress. He could feel the storm pressing down around them, the wind whipping rain into his face, but the bigger storm was the fear in front of him. He gently helped her to her feet, supporting her as best he could. She was lighter than he expected, almost fragile. The ground was muddy and every step was a challenge, but he guided her toward the small shed he used for tools and occasional shelter. As they reached it, he realized the shed had not been used for anything significant in years, but it smelled faintly of hay and old wood. But it was dry, and that was enough for now. Once inside, Ethan set the blanket-wrapped woman down on an old wooden bench. Breath. She curled into herself, the blanket still pulled tight around her. He hesitated for a moment, unsure how much he should uncover. But he needed to see if she was hurt badly. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and began to pull back the top of the blanket. What he saw made his stomach drop. There were marks on her arms, bruises in dark purples and reds, and what looked like faint scars from long ago. Not the kind of injuries caused by a simple fall or accident. These were signs of pain inflicted intentionally, signs that someone had wanted to keep her from being free. Ethan's heart pounded, and he felt a cold wave of fear wash over him. This is bad, he whispered to himself, more to steady his own nerves than anything else. The woman flinched slightly at his voice, but did not try to resist. She was too weak, too frightened. Ethan realized she had probably been through something terrible, something that no one should ever endure, and for some reason she had ended up on his isolated ranch, alone in the rain. He quickly covered her back with a blanket and stepped back, unsure what to do next. Wrath. His first instinct was to call for help, but then he remembered how far he was from town, how slow the reception could be, and how dangerous it might be to bring attention to someone in this state too quickly. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. This was no longer just a situation to observe. He had to act. He fetched a bucket of warm water and some clean cloths from the shed. The woman barely protested as he cleaned her cuts and bruises, his movements careful and deliberate, breaking. Every so often she would murmur something indistinct and he would ask her to repeat it. Slowly the words became clearer. She had been trapped somewhere, she had been afraid of being found, and she didn't know who she could trust. Aspirations. Ethan listened quietly, offering her small reassurances.
"You're safe here," he said.
"I won't let anyone hurt you while you're with me." She nodded weakly, not fully trusting him yet, but willing to accept his help. He knew it would take time for her to feel secure, and that was okay.
He had time. The storm raged on outside, the wind howling through the gaps in the shed walls. Ethan sat on the bench beside her, talking softly about the ranch, about the cattle, about the weather. Anything to distract her from the fear. He realized that talking to someone else, even someone he barely knew, brought back a part of himself he had thought was gone. It was strange, almost uncomfortable, to feel needed again. But he didn't shy away from it. Hours passed, the storm slowly dying down. The woman had drifted into a shallow sleep, her breathing uneven but steady. Ethan stayed alert, watching over her, making sure she was warm and dry. He thought about what he would do next, how he could help her, and what dangers might still be out there. The reality of the situation was terrifying, but he also knew that turning his back now was not an option. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a spark of purpose beyond the daily chores of ranch life. He had been given a responsibility, one that could change both their lives forever. The night stretched on, and though he was tired and soaked from the storm, he remained vigilant. Somewhere deep inside, he understood that this moment, This strange, terrifying, fragile moment was the beginning of something new. And even though he didn't yet know the full story, even though fear still curled tightly in his chest, Ethan Hale knew one thing for certain. He would not let her face the darkness alone. Ethan stayed by the woman's side through the long, stormy night, watching over her as she drifted in and out of shallow sleep. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, and the wind no longer whipped against the shed with the same intensity, leaving only the soft patter on the roof. Even so, the shed felt small and vulnerable, the walls barely protecting them from the vast darkness outside. Ethan could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had never had anyone rely on him like this before. By the first light of dawn, the woman's breathing had evened out, and she stirred slightly. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing a mix of fear and exhaustion. She looked at Ethan with confusion, her gaze wary yet searching for something familiar in his face. Ethan offered a small, gentle smile, trying to appear calm despite the knot of anxiety twisting in his stomach.
"You're awake," he said softly.
"Raise. It's morning now. You're safe here."
"Nothing will hurt you while you're with me?"
The woman nodded slightly but didn't speak. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to say something but wasn't sure she could. Ethan noticed the slight shiver running through her shoulders and quickly grabbed a clean, dry coat from a hook on the wall. He draped it over her, hoping it would help her feel some comfort in the cold, damp shed. "Can you tell me your name?" Ethan asked carefully. He didn't want to push too hard, but he needed to know at least something about her. The woman hesitated, her eyes dropping to the floor. "Claire," she whispered finally, the single word trembling in the quiet morning. "Claire." Matthews. Ethan nodded slowly. "All right, Claire. My name is Ethan."
You're safe here. I'll help you. But I need to understand what happened so we can get you the help you need.
Rasp. Claire looked away again, her hands clutching the coat tightly around her. She didn't speak for several long moments, and Ethan realized that whatever she had gone through, it had left her fearful and cautious. She was not ready to trust anyone completely yet, and that was okay. He could wait.
He had time. Ethan decided to give her some space while still staying nearby.
He went outside to check the cattle, making sure the animals were safe from the lingering effects of the storm. The ground was muddy, and puddles had formed in low areas, but nothing had escaped or been harmed. The sight of the grazing cows, wet but unharmed, offered him a small comfort. At least some parts of the world were still steady, even when the unexpected and frightening appeared. When he returned to the shed, he found Claire sitting quietly on the bench, wrapped in the coat and blanket. She seemed calmer in the daylight, but her eyes still held shadows of fear. Ethan pulled up a small wooden stool beside her and sat down. He didn't rush to ask questions again, breaths. Instead, he began talking softly, telling her about the ranch, the routines he followed, and even small, ordinary things like what kind of feed he gave the cows and how he repaired the fences. Claire listened quietly at first, only nodding occasionally. Gradually, her eyes lifted, and she began to focus on Ethan's words. There was something about his calm, steady voice that seemed to reassure her, even if she didn't fully trust it yet. Slowly, she began to speak in short sentences, fragments of thoughts and memories that came out haltingly. I didn't know where to go, she said finally. Her voice was weak, but Ethan could hear the underlying fear. They were everywhere. I couldn't get away. Breaths. Ethan nodded, encouraging her to continue without pressing too hard.
"Take your time,"
he said. "Just tell me what you feel safe telling me. You don't have to share everything all at once. Claire hesitated, then swallowed hard before continuing. I kept somewhere. I don't know how long. Breaths.
They said I couldn't leave. I tried.
But they were always watching.
Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled the blanket closer around her.
Ethan could see faint scars on her wrists, small but clear signs of long-term restraint.
He swallowed, trying to keep his own fear and anger in check.
The reality of what Claire had endured was terrifying, and yet she was alive. That was what mattered most in that moment. He could worry about everything else later. For now, she needed warmth, food, and reassurance. Ethan rose and went to the small kitchen area of the ranch house nearby. He prepared a simple breakfast, hot tea, some toast, and soft scrambled eggs.
He brought the plate back to the shed, careful not to make sudden movements that might alarm her. "Here," he said gently, setting the plate in front of her.
"Eat something! You need energy!" But Claire looked at the food, hesitating, but the hunger in her eyes won over her fear. She took a small bite, then another, and finally began eating slowly. Ethan watched quietly, resisting the urge to ask too many questions. This was a small step, but it was a step toward recovery.
As she ate, Ethan thought about what they should do next. He couldn't keep Claire hidden forever, but he also knew that rushing could put her in danger again.
The authorities could help, but he needed to make sure she felt safe enough to cooperate. For now, he focused on the present, helping her regain her strength and sense of security.
After breakfast, he suggested a short walk around the ranch. "The air will help clear your head," he said.
Claire nodded, wrapping the blanket and coat tight around her as they stepped outside. The sun was beginning to break through the clouds, casting warm light across the wet grass. Puddles reflected the soft morning glow, and the distant mountains appeared sharper in the clearer light. They walked slowly, Ethan keeping a careful distance to respect her space. Claire seemed hesitant at first, but as they moved farther from the shed, she began to relax slightly. The gentle sound of the wind through the grass and the soft lowing of the cattle created a calm rhythm that helped ease the tension in her shoulders. I don't know why I ended up here, she said quietly.
I didn't even know this place existed.
Ethan nodded. Sometimes the world brings us to unexpected places. What matters is that you're safe now. You'll have time to figure out the rest. Claire looked at him, her eyes searching. Why are you helping me? She asked softly, the vulnerability in her voice striking Ethan deeply. He thought for a moment before answering. Because it's the right thing to do. Because I couldn't ignore someone in need, perhaps. And because sometimes helping someone else helps you too. Break. His voice was steady, but there was a hint of emotion behind it. He hadn't realized how lonely he had been until now, how much he had missed human connection. For a while they walked in silence, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch waking up. Ethan could feel a small shift in Claire, a slight easing of her tension. She was still scared, still wary, but she was beginning to trust him, even if only a little. As the day progressed, Ethan helped Claire wash up and change into some clean clothes he had set aside. She was quiet during the process, but she allowed him to assist her, trusting him more than before. The small acts of care, drying her hair, wrapping a fresh blanket around her shoulders, preparing simple meals, became moments of connection. Ethan realized that this trust was fragile. One wrong word, one sudden movement, and it could vanish. He moved carefully, speaking softly, explaining everything he did before he did it. Claire responded with small nods, occasionally looking up at him with eyes that held both fear and hope. By evening, the sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the ranch. Ethan and Claire sat on the porch of the house, watching the last light fade behind the mountains. The air was cooler now, and the quiet of the evening was comforting. For the first time since arriving on the ranch, Claire spoke more freely, sharing small details about her life, fragments of memories, and even brief glimpses of humor. Ethan listened, offering small reassurances and gentle conversation. He realized that progress was slow, but it was happening. Claire was beginning to heal, even if only slightly, and for Ethan, the experience was changing him as well. His routine, his solitude, his quiet life. Everything had been disrupted, but in a way that made him feel alive again. As night fell, they returned to the shed, preparing for another quiet night. Ethan set up a small cot for Claire, making sure she was warm and comfortable. He stayed nearby, sitting in a chair and watching over her as she drifted into sleep. He knew this was only the beginning. There were still questions, still dangers, still uncertainties. But for now, they were safe. And sometimes that was enough. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a strange sense of purpose. He wasn't just a lonely rancher anymore. He was a protector, a witness, and a guide for someone who had been through something unimaginable, and he was determined to do whatever he could to help Claire find safety, healing, and hope. The morning air was crisp and quiet, with only the faint rustling of leaves in the trees to break the stillness. Ethan Hale had risen early, as was his habit, but this time he wasn't alone. Claire, though still cautious and fragile, had woken and moved to the small kitchen area of the shed, wrapping herself in a blanket for warmth. The quiet routine of making breakfast felt different this morning. There was a weight of unspoken questions in the air, and Ethan could feel that Claire was beginning to wonder what her next steps would be.
He set a kettle of water on the small stove and prepared 2 cups of tea.
The smell of boiling water mixed with the faint aroma of the old wood in the shed, creating a sense of comfort and routine. Claire watched him quietly, her hands clasping the blanket tightly. For a moment, she said nothing, and Ethan allowed the silence to linger. Finally, she spoke. I don't know if I can go back anywhere. They might still be looking for me. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but Ethan could hear the fear woven into each word. He nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of her words. You don't have to decide anything right now, he said gently. The most important thing is that you're safe. We'll figure out the rest when the time is right. Breath. Claire looked at him, her eyes searching for reassurance. But what if they come here? What if they find me? Ethan's mind raced. The ranch was remote, but it wasn't impossible for someone to find them if they knew what to look for. He had to think carefully about how to protect her while still helping her begin to heal. We'll be careful, he said. The ranch is isolated, and no one comes here unless I tell them. I'll make sure you're protected. But we need to start thinking about the next steps. After breakfast, Ethan suggested they take a walk to inspect the northern fence line again. It was a routine task, but it served a greater purpose. It allowed Claire to get fresh air, regain strength, and begin to feel some sense of normalcy. She agreed reluctantly, wrapping the blanket tightly around herself as they stepped out. A morning light cast long shadows across the wet grass, and the scent of damp earth was strong in the cool air. As they walked, Ethan kept a careful distance, speaking softly and explaining each step. Bow. The fence is old in some places, he said. We'll need to repair a few sections soon, but it's sturdy enough for now. The cattle usually stay close to the barn, but sometimes they wander if there's something interesting in the grass. Claire listened quietly, her eyes scanning the open fields, the mountains in the distance, and the scattered trees. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to notice the beauty of the world around her. She felt small and fragile, but there was a strange sense of peace in the vastness of the land. The fear still lingered, but it was tempered by the calm, steady presence of Ethan at her side. After checking the fence, they returned to the shed. Ethan suggested they organize a small space for Claire, somewhere she could feel safe and have a sense of ownership. He cleared an old storage corner, bringing in a clean mattress, blankets, and a few simple comforts. Claire helped him, moving cautiously at first, then gradually, more confidently. By the end of the morning, the space felt like a small sanctuary, simple but warm and safe.
Ethan knew that physical safety was only part of what Claire needed.
Emotional safety was equally important, and he spent the afternoon talking with her, gently encouraging her to share what she could about her experiences. She spoke slowly at first, hesitating between each word, but gradually, fragments of her story began to emerge. They didn't let me leave, she said finally, her voice trembling. I tried to escape, but racist.
It was impossible. I didn't know if anyone would ever help me.
I thought I was alone forever.
Ethan listened without interruption, offering quiet reassurance.
You're not alone anymore, he said firmly. You're safe with me.
That's what matters right now.
Claire nodded, tears welling in her eyes, but the first time she allowed herself to feel some relief, though it was mixed with fear. She was beginning to trust Ethan, but trust was fragile and easily broken. Ethan understood this. He moved slowly, carefully, and with patience, knowing that any sudden action could undo the progress they had made. As the day progressed, Ethan suggested they do small tasks around the ranch, simple chores that allowed Claire to participate without overexerting herself. They fed the cattle together, repaired a broken fence post, and collected firewood for the evening. Each task was a small step toward normalcy, a way for Claire to feel capable and in control. During a break, they sat on a fallen log near the edge of the property, watching the sun dip lower in the sky. Ethan noticed Claire's eyes following the mountains in the distance. It's beautiful out here, she said quietly, breaths. Even with everything that's happened, it's still beautiful.
Ethan nodded. It is.
Sometimes, when life is hard, it helps to notice the small things. The world doesn't stop being beautiful just because we're hurting. Narration. It's still there, waiting for us to notice it again.
Claire looked at him, her expression thoughtful.
Do you ever feel lonely?
She asked. Ethan considered the question for a moment.
I did, he admitted. For a long time. But
I think loneliness is part of life. What matters is what we do with it. Helping you has reminded me that even when we're alone, we can still make a difference in someone else's life.
ask. That connection, that makes the loneliness easier to bear. Breath. Claire nodded slowly, as if absorbing the weight of his words. She seemed to understand, in a way that went beyond her own fear and pain. For a moment they sat in silence, watching the fading light and listening to the gentle sounds of the ranch. As evening approached, Ethan prepared a small meal for them. They ate quietly, the warmth of the food and the fire offering comfort after the long day. Claire was calmer now, though still cautious. Ethan knew that trust would take time, but each small moment of connection was a step forward. After dinner, they returned to the shed. Ethan helped Claire settle into her space, making sure she was warm and comfortable. He stayed nearby, reading quietly while she drifted into a deep sleep. The storm from days earlier was long gone, replaced by calm, clear skies and a gentle breeze. Ethan reflected on the day. Claire was slowly beginning to heal, both physically and emotionally. She was learning to trust him, and he was learning to care for someone in a way he hadn't for years. The bond they were forming was fragile but real, a connection born out of shared experience and mutual need.
But Ethan also knew that the danger wasn't completely gone.
Past was still a shadow over them, and the world beyond the ranch could still bring threats. He had to be vigilant, careful, and patient. For now, the most important thing was keeping her safe and helping her feel secure. The night settled over the ranch, quiet and still. Ethan sat in the small chair beside Claire's cot, watching over her. The events of the past few days had changed everything. His routine, his solitude, his sense of purpose. He had found a reason to care again, a reason to act, and a reason to hope. Claire stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly. Ethan reached out, placing a gentle hand on the blanket covering her.
"You're safe," he whispered.
You're safe now. He stayed there for hours, listening to the quiet breathing, feeling the calm of the night, and reflecting on the responsibility he had taken on. It was a heavy burden, but it was also a gift, a chance to make a difference, to protect someone, and to reconnect with the world in a way he hadn't for years. Ethan knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be questions, there would be fears, and there would be decisions that had to be made carefully. But for now, they were safe, and that was enough. As he finally leaned back in the chair, exhaustion settling into his bones, he allowed himself a small moment of relief. Claire was alive. Breath. She was safe. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt that he could face the future, whatever it might bring, with purpose and determination. The night stretched on, quiet and protective, holding them both in its calm embrace. And somewhere deep inside, Ethan knew that the events of the past days were only the beginning of a story that would change both of their lives forever. The morning sun rose slowly over Ethan Hale's ranch, casting soft golden light across the wet fields and the distant mountains. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of earth and fresh grass. Ethan stood at the edge of the porch, sipping a mug of tea, watching the cattle graze quietly in the distance. Everything seemed calm, almost ordinary. Yet beneath that calm, he felt the lingering weight of responsibility. Claire's safety was no longer just his concern. It had become a part of his life, and he knew that the outside world could not be ignored forever. Claire had woken early, but for the first time in days, she did so without fear in her eyes. She moved quietly to the shed, carrying her blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The night had been peaceful, and sleep had done much to ease her exhaustion. She looked at Ethan with a small, tentative smile. It was a smile that had not come easily. It was fragile, but it was there. "Good morning," she said softly. Ethan returned the smile. "Good morning," he replied. "You slept well?" "Yes, better than I have in a long time." Her voice was steady, but Ethan could see that memories of the past still lingered, shadows she couldn't quite shake. After a simple breakfast of eggs and toast, Ethan knew that the next step had to be considered carefully. Claire could not stay hidden on the ranch forever, and they both knew it. But going to the authorities would require trust, courage, and planning.
Ethan explained the situation calmly. "We need to think about the next steps," he said.
You can't stay here forever, and there are people who can help you safely. But we won't do anything you're not ready for.
First, we make sure you're strong enough, and we make a plan that keeps you safe. Claire nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She still hesitated at the thought of leaving the ranch, of returning to a world that had been so dangerous to her. But she trusted Ethan. Breaths. Slowly, she began to understand that he would not betray that trust, that he would not rush her into danger. Over the next few days, Ethan focused on helping Claire regain her strength and confidence. They performed simple chores together, repaired fences, fed the cattle, and collected firewood. Each small task gave Claire a sense of control she had not felt in weeks, maybe months. The physical work also distracted her from lingering fears, giving her the chance to feel capable and alive at the same time. Ethan helped Claire recover emotionally. They spent hours talking quietly, sitting on the porch in the early morning light or near the small fire in the shed desk. Claire shared more details of her past, carefully and slowly, while Ethan listened patiently. He offered reassurance, guidance, and quiet support, never pressuring her to speak more than she was ready to. "Psst, you're safe now," he repeated often, "and nothing will hurt you here. Not while I'm around." Those words, simple and repeated, slowly began to ease the tension in Claire's shoulders. She started to laugh softly at small things, her humor subtle but real. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel hope. And for Ethan, watching that hope grow was like discovering sunlight after years of darkness. Despite the progress, Ethan knew the situation was delicate. He could not allow Claire to remain completely isolated from the outside world forever. They needed help, someone who could ensure her long-term safety and begin the process of seeking justice for what she had endured. He carefully began making plans. One morning after a quiet breakfast, Ethan suggested a small trip into the nearest town. "We just need to get some supplies," he said casually, "and check in with someone who can help." He phrased it lightly, making it sound like a routine task, but the truth was heavier. This trip would be the first time Claire faced the outside world since arriving at the ranch. Claire hesitated, wrapping her blanket tighter around herself. What if they find me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan knelt slightly, meeting her eyes. "No one will find you, I promise." "We will be careful, and we will go slowly. You're not alone in this." She nodded, trusting him, though her fear was still visible. Together they prepared for the trip, bringing only what was necessary and leaving the rest behind. Break anything. Ethan made sure the route they would take avoided any usual paths and kept them out of sight from the occasional traveler who might pass by. The drive to town was tense but calm. Rest. Ethan spoke softly, keeping the conversation light, while Claire kept her eyes on the passing landscape. She noticed the mountains receding in the distance, the small farms scattered across the plains, and the occasional town buildings appearing further ahead. Each moment brought a mix of fear and curiosity, a reminder of the world she had been kept from for so long. When they arrived at the town, Ethan took her to a small office run by a social worker he trusted. The woman greeted them kindly, understanding that Claire had been through a difficult time. She explained the process calmly, making sure Claire felt in control of every decision. "You're safe now," the social worker said. "We'll help you, step by step. No one will pressure you, and you can go at your own pace." Claire nodded, taking a deep breath. It was strange, stepping into a place with other people after so long, Yet, she felt a sense of relief. For the first time, she realized that there were people outside the ranch who could help her heal and keep her safe. Over the next few weeks, Claire began the process of rebuilding her life. The social worker arranged counseling, medical checkups, and legal support. Ethan stayed close, helping her adjust and ensuring she did not feel overwhelmed. Each day brought small victories, simple steps like speaking more freely, smiling, or participating in activities she had once enjoyed. Through it all, Ethan remained a steady presence. He did not intrude, but was always nearby when needed. He celebrated the small victories with Claire, whether it was a laugh shared over a meal or a quiet moment watching the sunset. Their bond grew stronger, not just out of necessity, but out of genuine care and mutual respect. One afternoon, Claire walked with Ethan to the edge of the ranch, looking out over the vast fields and distant mountains.
Breath.
She paused, taking a deep breath, the wind carrying the fresh scent of grass and earth. "I never thought I'd feel safe again," she said quietly.
But I do. I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. Ethan smiled softly. It's been a long journey, but you're stronger than you know. You've made it through the worst, and now it's time to focus on the future. Claire turned to him, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you. You don't have to thank me. You survived. You fought to be here. I just helped you along the way. That's all that matters. As the weeks turned into months, Claire continued to heal. Breath. She grew more confident, her laughter returning and her strength rebuilding. Ethan watched with quiet pride, knowing that their lives had changed forever. The bond they had formed in the shed during the storm had become something deeper, an unspoken understanding of survival, trust, and human connection. The ranch itself began to feel different as well. It was no longer just a place of routine and solitude. It had become a sanctuary, a safe place where two people had learned to trust, heal, and care for one another. The wide fields and distant mountains, once symbols of isolation, now symbolized hope and freedom best. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the fields, Ethan and Claire sat on the porch together. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air was calm and quiet. They watched in silence, both feeling the weight of what they had endured and the hope of what lay ahead. I never imagined life could feel like this again, Claire said softly. Narration.
Ethan nodded. Sometimes life surprises us.
Even after the darkest times, there is a chance for light. We just have to be willing to accept it. Claire leaned back, letting the warmth of the evening settle over her. She knew that the road ahead would still have challenges, but she also knew that she was no longer alone. Presence. The safety of the ranch and the support of those who could help her had given her the courage to face the future. For Ethan, the experience had changed him too. His solitude had been broken, and in its place was connection, responsibility, and purpose. He had learned that even in the quietest, loneliest places, human bonds could grow and thrive. He had discovered that helping someone in need could heal not just their wounds, but his own. As night fell, the ranch was peaceful. The stars began to appear in the clear sky, shining brightly above the fields and mountains. Ethan and Claire sat quietly, feeling the calm, the safety, and the hope that had returned to their lives. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and the remnants of the past. They had survived, and together they had found a way to move forward. In that moment, Ethan realized that life, no matter how lonely or difficult it might seem, always held the possibility of connection, hope, and renewal. And as he watched Claire resting safely beside him, he knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for her, but for both of them. The ranch, once a place of solitude and silence, had become a place of life, healing, and hope. And in that quiet, golden light of a new day, Both Ethan and Claire finally understood what it meant to be truly safe, truly cared for, and truly alive.